Yvette, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you as a presenter at the 7th annual Step Up conference that's coming up on April 28th. And so you have a session, the afternoon session from 2 to 4, and your session is a primer on privacy and risk in our communities. Tell me about
Yes,
that.
thank you. Thank you so much for offering us this opportunity to share about our work. Basically, I think one of the things that I think about when it comes to safety is the abundance of information that is navigating in both cyberspace, but also through word of mouth, right? And one of the things that I've learned about information is that once it's created, it cannot be destroyed, right? Yet, I think in particular with identities that are marginalized or othered in one way, shape, form, or another. So whether it be neurodiversity or the intersections of neurodiversity, race, gender, class, ability, age, all these different markers really, with so much of our information out there, they could be used to target people who either look differently than us or believe differently than us. And so I think it's really important that that we create spaces to talk about that, because I was just at a conference on Monday, the National Institute of Cybersecurity Education, and they target cybersecurity education for K-12. And there were, people in industry there, government, military folks, academics, scholars, all in the room, and also practitioners, right? K-12 educators. And I really loved how they talked about it. And they said, if you're 5 years old, you're a cyber warrior. If you are 55 years old, you are a cyber warrior, right? And so really bringing to light that conversation that privacy and security of information is everybody's business.
Yes, exactly. And it's compared to even 10, 15 years ago, the amount of information that can just be pumped out so quickly. It's just it's amazing. And so with this session that you're going to be doing at Step Up, what's the format that you're going to have? Like, what are some of the things that the attendees could be expecting?
Well, they can expect definitely a hook, right? I'm going to give them some numbers and some statistics, but I'm going to encase them and start them with a story. Then they can expect some facts about different kinds of risk that information carry, as well as why privacy, right? Why does the privacy matter? I think in the realm of personally identifiable information, there are 3 classifications: information that might be sensitive, information that might be confidential, and information that is high risk, right? And I might consider information high risk, but maybe it's not high risk for somebody else, right? But I think, especially in the technological space, really thinking about how, if our information gets out, right? If it's FERPA protected or HIPAA protected, and people get access to it either by a breach or by accidental slip of the tongue. One of the reasons why I think it's so important is that the people can gather that information, 1, to market, or 2, to spin a narrative about someone that could be damaging. I mean, and especially with the racial violence issues, I mean, we've seen it time and time again, where somebody has an issue with armed forces, police, whatever it may be, and the picture that they paint of the person is not one that is kind, right? They look at the person in their worst light, on their worst day, when they maybe made some poor choices, and then that's that person, right? That's 100% what we want to believe about that person. And I think, in full fairness and transparency, I'm what a woman with PTSD looks like. And it is something that I manage, right? And that I'm intentional about because it matters. However, that information taken out of context could create bubbles of doubt or of misinformation in order to incite fear, right? And I have spoken to many psychologists, both in a professional as well as in a personal sense. And, you know, it is a common practice for people to say, oh, don't share that diagnosis because it's associated with violence. And it's like, actually, that's a myth, and if so, I think that, there's two schools of thoughts that I carry. And one is we need to be able to share the right information at the right time with the right people. The other part is if we also need to be mindful of the information people share with us and really dive into that and think about it. And so with the session, we're going to have a breakout portion where one group will look at individual types of interactions, another group will look at family, another one's going to look at community, and then another one's going to look at organizational or enterprise, right? Because I think that these are wicked problems. And unfortunately, the technologies that we use are disruptive technologies currently, right? And so the fact that the law around privacy, even though there are laws to protect it, the technologies surpass the laws. And so privacy as a concept is really fluid and something that it takes all of us to really be mindful of it, right? Especially for identities that are marginalized.
Yes. So we've got to be really careful on what we put out on social media and everything like that, for our own privacy. But you brought up a really critical point on the bias that can be created based off of having a photo of someone that is not on their best day. And then that narrative is created and people start believing that narrative, which is like, wow, that is so unfair. It's like, can you all dig a little bit deeper and ask a little bit better questions than just coming to this place of judgment, because of what they see. And for the marginalized community, as you were mentioning, there is a high risk of faces being put out there and being criminalized because of a certain narrative of what is, the information that is placed out there.
Right.
Wow. So this is going to be great.
Yeah. And I think, two things that I think are important, right? And that is the idea of cognitive dissonance, right? All of us have bias. It's not a bad thing. It's kind of like what drives us. But when we encounter information and an abundance of information, right? That selection, that curated package could sell a narrative that can make you believe something, right? And I think, with this idea, you brought, I think you articulated it beautifully, right? Which is the narrative. Well, the whole premise of my research when I was associated with the University of Washington was around counter narratives, right? And really saying, okay, this is what you believe, but I'm the one with the lived experience, and I'm the one with this kind of education. This is what I understand to be true, right? And I understand it from a place of knowledge. I understand it from a place of humility. I understand it from a place of compassion, right? And so I know that, we've kind of been parallel in the journey, and then I've kind of been taking care of some other priorities. But in that doctorate journey, I think I didn't know what kind of doctor I wanted to be, right? However, the hat that I've always worn has been one of an educator. And I really started thinking about, the work that I was doing that was about this type of public scholarship and the ramifications given so many worldly events that have happened, in the last 5 years, let's say, or 6 or 7 years, right? that I think it's really important to understand that I think about the kind of doctor that I want to be, and this is the kind, right? And with that, it's like, okay, you know, I know medical doctors or other kinds of doctors, right? They have a very clear path of study, but they also have a very clear path of guidance around patients, right? Of guidance around that information. But when that path is not as clearly delineated, and then on top of that, you have intersecting identities, or you encounter a health issue or concern or a breach, right? Both of them can lead to damaging of kind of like the integrity, right? Because then it's no longer, oh, somebody that needs help. It is, oh, someone that is problematic, right? And I think, you know, my parents left Cuba because of the political regime and the lack of freedom of speech, right? And the fact that there wasn't privacy, because you had the neighborhood watchdogs that were watching who was coming into your house. And so I think, you know, really taking that stand of information and following the American Library Association Code of Ethics has been really instrumental in having me, you know, really think about not just the theoretical parts of it, but the applied parts of it, because all of us encounter these issues, right? Somebody shares with you, you know, I'm not having a good day, you know, and from a lot of people that I've spoken to, you know, people are more quickly to judge than they are to provide an environment of support, right? And all of us, given a different environment, could be our wellness, right, could suffer, right? Whether it's, you know, a financial issue, um, issues of family, issues of domestic violence, right? Regardless of what the issue is, those things would actually, and so I'll have at the session resources, right? Like, this is what company A says are 20 things to look out for, and that they should be areas of concern. But I think that if we were to, each of us, right, individually, take a candid look in the mirror, we can say, yeah, you know, at some point in my life, I've encountered some of these things.
Right.
And yet,
Right.
what's made the difference between being able to get past that or, you know, falling into really harder times? And I think that part of that is community, part of it is value system, right? Our belief system. Part of that is psychology, right? Part of that is education, or like what type of support you have, right? But when you taggle all those things on, I mean, that's why, I mean, cybersecurity is one of the areas that is not just booming, but it's booming. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And it's kind of ironic and I use that as kind of like, I'm not sure what the right word is, but I think that there is a little bit of irony in it, because like even in cybersecurity world, they talk about no trust. Well, guess what? In our communities, in our workplaces, in our schools, right? In our jobs, or in like leadership in Snohomish County, we have to operate on trust. If we don't, then we don't have the strength of community. We don't have that development, right? We don't have that innovation, right? And so I think, you know, just being sensitive. So what I'm hoping people will get is an opportunity to think about, you know, privacy and information from a few different perspectives, to hear what other folks have to say, because I am one voice, but this is definitely a complex issue that needs everybody to be thinking about it, so that we can be stewards for ourselves, for our families, and for each other. And then really, I'd like people to be able to take away some resources, right? So I'll have some resources available. So if they want to find out more, if they want to get connected to some spaces, and, you know, the idea of The hacker unfortunately has like a very bad um not good PR, right? Like it's not good PR. And, and at the same time, like there are statistics that say, you know, a lot of the breaches happen because of insider threat, and a person can go from a trusted source to an insider threat in a blink of an eye. It doesn't have to be necessarily a malicious actor. It is someone who accidentally shares information that it wasn't their place to share, right? And that little breadcrumb leads to another little breadcrumb, which leads to an idea, which leads to another one. And then all of a sudden, oh, did you hear what happened? So and so was on the corner and, you know,
Right.
blah, 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 right? Like, and sometimes it's how communities operate as well, right? Like the telephone.
Exactly.
However,
Exactly.
for different identities, it
Right.
could be detrimental.
Right. So in this session, it's going to be it sounds like it's going to be very informational, and
Yeah.
also individuals or participants that can come to the session, they'll be able to take away these ideas and these resources so they can go back to their organization to see, hey, these are some of the things that we need to look out for when it comes to safety and security in regards to how we're disseminating information.
The culture of privacy, right?
The
And
culture, yeah.
I would add that it's going to be, I'm hoping that people will take away from it that it isn't just a workplace issue, it's a family issue. Talk to any 5-year-old, ask them who their mom is, they'll tell you. They'll tell you where they're going to go on the weekend, they tell you what school they go to, right? Like it really needs to be a family type of conversation. So I'm hoping, you know, to plant that seed so that we can be mindful of the importance of privacy and how to build trust and also be careful, right? Because we need to build bridges, and at the same time we have to understand that information and data can be classified in different ways. And especially, you know, if we're looking at large data sets like what you do on TikTok or more interpersonal um, data, like us having this conversation in private versus it being recorded, versus you and I meet up at a coffee shop and somebody watches us and we're in a public space and they record it, right? Very
Mhm.
different scenarios, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so really just again thinking about it. And I think that that was one of the reasons why I put a pause on the research that I was doing, because well, hmm, how do I how do I talk about these things while also understanding that like I have community too. I have
Right,
family too, right?
right, right.
We have to think about everybody, and what my risk level is with sharing of personal information changes. It changes daily.
Yep.
You know, so, some days I'm feeling more open to sharing, and other days it's like, no, not today. Right. And I think that as an educator, as a professional, I get to make those decisions. But when people take pictures without asking permission, right,
Mhm.
that has a lot of metadata associated with it. It says where you were, because it has that location, what time you were there, who else was there. And you know what? If I have a computer, I could use facial recognition software to figure out where you are. I was talking to someone the other day that said that some police departments have a software that if you take a picture inside of a hotel room and post it online and it's somebody that's missing, they could identify which hotel room in which state that picture was taken to help find people that are victims of trafficking, right? And so the power of technology, it may not be what you use, it may not be what I use, it may not be what the people in the room are using. But I think it's important that we have those conversations and understand just why it's so important
Yes.
for us to pause, you know, for us to pause and really take inventory before we share a story. If it's not my
Right.
story to share, you know, like in a lot of social justice spaces, it's like take the lesson, leave the details out,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But when you are an N of one, and when you are an N of one, there is no privacy. You're
Right.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So who do you think would benefit from attending your session?
Leaders, practitioners, allies, parents, um, educators. We don't teach this information in, the College of Ed. And so I think social workers, um, and again, I think that balancing zero trust with trust, right?
Right.
Some job classifications need to build trust, like the nurse or the social worker.
Right.
However, if you share certain types of information and somebody has a computer and the internet, they could find out information about your loved ones.
Right.
It's it's
Exactly.
that it's that simple, and
Exactly.
they may not have malicious intent again, but we're connected, right? By us being connected, if my computer gets hacked, guess what? All the people that I'm connected to are now at risk,
Yes.
right? And any communications that we've done. And so, again, I will share some resources for kind of like having boundaries
Mm.
and for having thought processes, because this isn't you should do this. It is, how can we think about this together? How can we
Yes.
have these conversations with our young people, with our little ones, right? With our grandkids, with our siblings, with other people that may not think about privacy in the same way, right? Because one example, in FedEx office, I was there for a year, in the role of assistant manager. When they talk about information security, they say it is everyone's business, from the driver to the person in the front counter, to the person that is cleaning the bathrooms, to the person that's working in the warehouse. It is everybody's business, right?
Yeah.
If they lose that, they're losing reputational risk, and they're also losing financial ability and trust with their customers,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so I think that, again, we are about creating a community that is thinking about racial justice and thinking about how we can build equity. And one of the ways that I see that we can do that is by thinking about privacy through this kind of filter, right?
Yes.
Through the
Yes.
through the kind of filter that all information. I mean, librarians have been pretty radical since the beginning of time, in especially with things like banned books and preserving the rights of privacy around what you read and why you read it, and saying that it is your prerogative. And there have even been controversial issues in libraries around even like things like pornography,
Hmm.
and each library and librarian and information professional handles it in their community differently. I think that, yes, we have laws and yes, we have practices, but I think that we also need to think about how are each of us as individuals and as community members going to be part of the conversation and advocacy for privacy, right?
This session sounds like it is for everybody because you're saying, the security is everyone's business. And so my question is, what is the single most important message you want to convey to your audience to help move racial equity forward?
Hmm. Give me just 1 second. Let me think. The single most important message that I want to convey is that privacy, it matters. That's it.
Yes, yes, it does. And I love that you talk about, just a 5-year-old will give out information and being
Mhm.
careful about that. So you are right. It is a family conversation. It is a community conversation. And so I'm really looking forward to having you at the 7th annual Step Up Conference, which is awesome. So what motivated you to actually present at the Step Up Conference?
Well, I presented a couple of years ago, and I was looking for an opportunity. And that session, it's kind of a little bit tied. Though this one is just solely on privacy, that one was critical conversations around technology, right? And so a little bit broader topic back then, but I think now I'm honing into an area that I really want to specialize in and focus on, because I see just how important it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to our listeners, if they, if they want to know more about the privacy and the risk in our communities, check out Yvette's session on April 28th from 2 to 4. It sounds like it's going to be very informative and a lot of really deep, good information that individuals can take back to their organizations as well as their homes. So Yvette, thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. And I look forward to your session on April 28th.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you.
Absolutely. Thank you.